Okay, hi, this is Free Media Live, and what we're going to talk about today is that the presidential elections are basically like a going into a ice cream parlor and picking out your favorite flavor. Americans just go in the parlor. They don't really analyze the issues. They just look at the candidates. Look at maybe they might look at a debate. I don't know. Maybe not. And they say, well, this looks like a good candidate. Let's try them out. Just like you go in the ice cream parlor, you look at a flavor, say that looks like a good flavor. Let me have it. Let me get 2 scoops and try it out. So Americans just do the same when they pick their president. We just take a look at the candidates. We don't bother analyzing their policy, reading up on them. We just go in there, pick one out that looks good, might have nice hair, might have a presidential look, or maybe they scored big in the last presidential debate. They were confronted about their ex-wife saying that they asked for an open marriage, and then they just slapped down the moderator in grand style, saying the media is out to get me, blah blah blah. Maybe the media is out to get you, but let's look past that and let's look at where you stand on the issues. Just because you're good at slapping down the media doesn't mean you're a good flavor. I mean, we got to live with whatever you're going to do for 4 years. So why would we just want to go in the ice cream parlor and look at the different flavors and just say, let me have those 2 scoops and good to go for 4 more years. And then when you don't like that flavor, you go back in the ice cream parlor and you pick out another flavor, try him out for another 4 years. That's all we do. We don't read up on them. We don't study them. All we do is pick out the next good-looking flavor, and people wonder why the economy and everything's such a mess. Instead of taking the time, go through all the issues, look at their legislative records, we just go from one flavor to the next. And that's all that's been going on in this Republican primary. Everybody just switches flavors. Why did they choose a specific flavor in the first place? And then just as quickly they drop that flavor and go for a new flavor. What was the reason for picking the flavor in the first place? And why did they give up on that flavor and move on to the next flavor? Was it anything more than, that flavor looks delicious? We have a presidential election, we just look at the flavors and we just pick one out. It's a good looking flavor and we just pick it. It's just amazing. The country's bankrupt, and now we have one candidate saying, well, we need to have a new program, put colonists on the moon. I suppose that's how we're going to solve our budget deficit, by sending colonists to the moon, making the moon the 51st state. And of course, I'm talking about Newt Gingrich, and then Newt Gingrich was in Congress, and he had plenty of opportunity to get all these problems straight. And then he all of a sudden just left Congress, supposedly into the, quote, private sector, working for Freddie Mac, I believe, making big bucks working for Freddie Mac. And then we got Mitt Romney, who flip-flop around on health care, Romney care, abortion, tax policy, everything, gun control, everything. He's just constantly changing positions, and now he's the new Mr. Conservative. The question is why no one looks at these guys' legislative records. Then we got Rick Santorum, and Mr. Santorum, he was in the Senate, and he voted for the Lautenberg gun ban, and supposedly now he's a big one for the Second Amendment. But what about his record? Voting for the gun ban, raising the budget, the debt ceiling 5 times, and then we're told that he's somehow conservative. All these guys have a legislative record showing that they're not conservative, and now we're told they are conservative. But what's the reason? How is it that they're all of a sudden conservative when their records don't show they're conservative? They're conservative because they're running for president, and they get in these debates, and they seem to have conservative positions because now they make these statements that means they are conservative. What about their past positions, their past legislative records showing they're not conservative? So it's not clear at all what the reason is to vote for them beyond they're just another flavor in the ice cream parlor, a good-looking flavor. Got nice heads of hair or whatever. Mr. Gingrich, he's quite a good speaker, a good debater. He ad-libs very well. And Mitt Romney is not quite as good a debater, but he does overall look presidential and so on. And then let's compare to someone like Ron Paul, who tends to get more intellectual about the issues themselves, and his legislative record, if you want a conservative, is quite impressive. Some people very concerned about his foreign policy, that they say he's, quote, isolationist. But that just depends on how you're going to define isolationist. If isolationist means that we can't solve the world's problems by sending troops across the world, then yes, that would be isolationist. But if you believe in what we would prefer to call non-interventionism, that we can't solve the world's problems by sending troops across the world, that we can't, by sending troops across the world, that this is going to fix the problems in all these countries, that these countries in the Middle East who are totally unstable and people don't have their rights, women's rights, minorities, etc. If you're not in the majority, then you might be persecuted and whatever. We might have an Al Qaeda or whoever in these countries, but this idea that we can send troops in to fight radical Islam. I mean, radical Islam is an idea, and you're going to defeat this idea with American troops in these countries. We can fix everything that's wrong with the world. We can fix it by simply sending troops in, defeating these people on the ground, these jihadists or whatever you want to call them. Defeat them on the ground with American troops. Yes, we can defeat them on the ground with our troops because we have superior firepower, superior organization, etc. But the problem is, after we defeat them, then we can't even, the people that we turn over the control back over to these to the governments that we've helped to establish in these countries, are equally as unstable as they were beforehand, and they can't protect the people or themselves from these radical jihadists. So that means, again, more troops, or sending troops back in. Meanwhile, while we're worried about fixing these countries overseas, we're bankrupting our own country, jeopardizing our own futures and the stability of our own country. Right now, we borrow or print over 40% of the federal budget every year, and there's no end in sight. The deficit just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. So the question becomes, when will this end? We have to finance all the domestic spending by printing and borrowing, plus all the military spending. So how can we continue it? How will it ever be fixed? We can't cut. There isn't any part of the budget that can really be cut without serious changes, by cutting overseas, cutting our commitments overseas, cutting our commitments in the U.S. The spending. Dr. Paul, Congressman Paul, he has a plan to cut the budget by $1 trillion in the first year. A serious plan to get the budget under control. But you don't hardly hear about it in the mainstream press. So all we hear about is these Republican candidates talking about somehow cutting taxes and basically minor cuts to the increases in the budget. We already had the Republican, the Tea Party. A number of Tea Party congressmen were elected in 2010, and then in the years since their election, we haven't had any real change. The debt ceiling was raised with promises of future budget cuts, while the deficit itself went up, and supposedly we're going to cut the future rate of increase in the budget over a 5 or 10 year period, and at the end of that period, then supposedly the deficit will be lower, and this is what the Tea Party accomplished. Promises of 5 or 10 years from now that we're going to have a balanced budget somehow. And then last spring, Obama's 2011 budget was passed again with promises of actual budget cuts, but most of the cuts turned out to be fake or imagined, or not really significant, because the budget deficit just keeps increasing. So, question again, what are we accomplishing? Instead of looking at the latest flavor of the month, going in the ice cream parlor, looking at which candidate looks good, has the best head of hair, the best debate speaker, the best ad-libber. It's easy like that. You just simply take a quick look at the different flavors, look at the toppings, nice hair, eloquent speaker. You pick the flavor, get your 2 scoops, good to go for another 4 more years. Who knows where we're headed from here. We're headed for another 4 years of Barack Obama or 4 years of Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich. We're looking like Iran. Keep going back and forth with Iran, putting increasing pressure on Iran. No, it would be preferable if Iran didn't have a nuclear bomb, etc. But will all this pressure we're putting on them result in a war? It obviously quite easily could. And the thing that everybody is ignoring is that all this pressure on Iran, may be actually counterproductive, because the Iranians are actually, the Iranian regime may fall at any time because they are under pressure from the Green Movement, which nearly overthrew them. They nearly overthrew them recently. And so the question is, the pressure causes everybody to circle the wagons around the regime that they don't like, against the pressure from the U.S. Since the regime it has a lot of opposition in Iran, and we've already seen the Libyan regime, Tanzania, Egypt as well. We've seen all these regimes being overthrown, brutal dictators overthrown, and all this pressure we're putting on Iran may be counterproductive, because it allows the Iranian regime to claim they're protecting Iran from the great state in the U.S. So it makes it difficult for the Green Movement in Iran to claim that they are for the people, for Iran, when the U.S. is putting so much pressure on them, trying to block the flow of oil. That's an interventionist foreign policy.